Hello everybody, we are back for another episode of Geeks and Barbells. We're going to geek out on a book today, The Shadow of What Was Lost, which is one of my newest editions. This is a really awesome cover for anyone who is a fan of cover art. James Islington really did his besties. I'm not sure who the actual illustrator is, but he hired a good one. This is really cool. Fantasy titles these days, especially the covers, they tend to get a little bit monotonous, but this is pretty nice. I like it. It gives you that sort of spirit of adventure, so to speak. It is also a very weighty book for a first novel, and I am going to gush. I'm going to fanboy out a little bit. The Shadow of What Was Lost is definitely not the most amazing novel I've ever read, but it takes a lot of, don't even want to call them tropes, but it takes a lot of things that have been done before and really puts them together in a great package. The character development, the pacing of the novel. If I were to use one word to describe this first book in the series, because it is part of the Lycanius trilogy, it is the first novel, I would say foreshadowing really, really is what this book is about. And generally that could be kind of annoying for some series where they're just constantly giving you hints and clues but never actually answering questions. That doesn't happen in this book. There is so much little tidbits, things that you never get the answer to at the beginning, and there was a lot of information thrown at you, but the series manages to put it together and slowly feed you the information over the course of the series, the book, that it's acceptable. It doesn't bother you. The pacing is just so well done. I think a lot of that has to do with the characters being interesting. They're not perfect, but they are very interesting. So the story setting itself starts back in, there used to be these people known as augurs. They were people who had the ability to read your mind, so to speak. They had the ability to manipulate people to a large degree using their magical abilities. And this was separated out. So you had augurs and you had people who were known as the gifted. So people who were known as the gifted were capable of using this internal energy known as essence, whereas augurs can use what is called Khan, an external energy which actually allows them not only to have their own unique abilities, but also manipulate essence to an even larger degree. So you had the augurs, who were the rulers of the Land Andara, which is the setting that's taking place for this book. And there was also the gifted, who could only touch essence. Now, quite a few years back, the people had enough of the augurs. They basically rose up, they overthrew the augurs, killed almost every single one of them, and many gifted were killed as well. Only a few survived in these places known as tolls, which is where the gifted used to be studying and learn. Only a few were allowed to survive. The survivors ended up being bound by what are called the tenets. The tenets basically made it that the gifted were screwed for all intents and purposes. They could not use their abilities in any shape or form to defend themselves, to attack a person. They could they basically could only use their abilities to learn some stuff, but they could not use them in any way, shape, or form. That in and of itself, people might think would be fine, since the ability to use essence gave them such a advantage over normal folks that it was only fair that they were not allowed to use it against other people. Unfortunately, the tenants also did not allow themselves to defend themselves in any way, and people hated them because of these gifts. So there was many cases of people abusing them, attacking them, and they could not defend themselves in any way, shape, or form. They also had what are called administrators, these people who, through the tenants, had the ability to basically order them around. And it was very difficult for the gifted to defend themselves against administrators as well. So the book starts off with these three characters who are introduced to, Davian, Ashalia, and Weir, who all have some interesting backstories to them. I want to try not to get into spoilers if I can. So as the series progresses, you find out more and more and more interesting things about both Davian and Weir. They both have some hidden backstories, some gifts and history that makes them be much more than they are. Ashalia, on the other hand, you don't really learn much at all about her history, where she came from, but yet there is, as I said before, because of this foreshadowing that is such a central part of the book series, you understand that there's something extremely important about her. But by the end of the book, you have no idea what it is. And normally that would be annoying as well, but it's not, because it's only a little tidbit that's given here and there that shows that she has something more to her. And so it really sets her up further on in the series to really become something even more special, which is fantastic. A huge part of this series, which you again see in little bits and pieces, is there's manipulation of time. You see characters who come back when they're older. You see characters who know some of the central characters from the future or from the past. And so you understand that time is being manipulated in many different ways to showcase things that could be happening, will happen, characters and how they're going to change massively into the future, yet you don't understand why. You learn a lot about enemies without truly understanding who they are, the Venerate. You learn about Arkandivade. You learn about who possibly is manipulating Arkandivade. So Arkandivade is this backdrop character who, for much of the book series, doesn't really matter to a certain degree. He's known as this shadowy evil figure who, over 2,000 years before, was locked behind this barrier, this wall of energy. It's not fully ever explained, but you assume it's some kind of magical barrier where him and his followers were locked behind many, many millennia ago. And supposedly this barrier is weakening, and these rumors and mysteries about Arkandivade are slowly filtering back out. Davian gets involved with people multiple times who are attempting to get his help to go and fix the barrier, which again, within the first book, you never even get him to that point. So these are all foreshadowings for what's going to happen in the future novels. It's really, really done well. The pacing is phenomenal. There's enough action, intrigue, there's a development of abilities that is slow. Davian himself ends up being an augur. He finds out, he has a hint of it, a clue of it at the beginning of the series, but it is confirmed after, and his abilities begin to develop, and you start to get to know exactly the differences between augurs, who they were, what they could do, and it's kind of slowly this meandering path where little bits of information in these characters slowly develop throughout the series, while at the same time we get these little hints, these foreshadowings constantly coming in, telling us who is this person really, what is going to happen in the future, how are the other books in the series going to develop this plot line. And it never feels like it's dragging on. It never feels like it's trying to hide too much. It just manages to give just enough in each chapter that keeps you guessing, keeps you wondering. You spend a lot of your time thinking, I wonder what this means. Oh, they said this little bit here. How does that connect with this? It's a book that manages to get you thinking like a detective, trying to get you to figure out exactly what is the author trying to get at without ever making it something so simple that you can just figure out on your own. You need to read the next book to really know what the author's trying to say. Now, there's some stuff which is a little bit obvious. There is another character who slowly becomes very, very central, known as Caden, and he, at least to me, is quite obvious who he is, and what he is what the author is trying to get at with his story. It is very much a story of redemption. It is very much a story of people not getting stuck in who they are, people making mistakes, people doing very, very bad things and trying to fix what they did. I think the whole story itself is a redemption story, a redemption for the gifted, a redemption for the augurs, a redemption for some very bad people. And the foreshadowing of these other lands, this foreshadowing of what happened in the past and how that connects to the present and how it connects to the future and how they're all intertwined, especially through this interesting concept of time travel. It is done great. I find it is great. I agree with this. Bunny agrees with this. We're in full agreement. I can't wait to get to the second novel and really pick up and figure out what the hell some of these things are. I really want to focus for a moment for those of you who are trying to figure out whether or not, because everybody's different. Some people are really much more interested in world building, and some people are much more interested in character development. It's not to say the two are necessarily separate per se. I think a good world helps a character develop, and a good character helps the world develop, because you see the world through the character's eyes and the world affects the character. So they are intertwined. But this book really, really makes you care about the characters. Ashalia is interesting. She is tough. She is strong no matter what's happened to her. There's not a single bit in this book series which makes me ever think of a woman in a weak state. There's almost nothing actually in this book series which talks about sexuality in any real way, which is actually nice. It's nice in a fantasy series to just literally have the focus of the characters completely be on the events that are happening. There's a little bit of romance, but it's barely there. So that's great. So Ashalia is really allowed to develop from this kind of gifted girl we don't know much about to someone who becomes really a force to be reckoned with, even though so much bad has happened to them. Davian, who's this unsure little boy who's kind of scared about what is happening to him, slowly develops into someone who has more force and character and has a value system that he's really stuck on. But he also kind of bleeds into these shades of gray, which I think are phenomenal. And that's what the series really maximizes, those shades of gray. There's a lot of series, they want to make everybody good and evil, and that's just how it is. Whereas in this series, you really see how much there's these shades of gray in every scenario. And the foreshadowing for what's going to happen in the next books in the series, I feel, is going to develop that even more. There's simply no other way for some of the characters developed with what we see in these little flashbacks and future people coming in and explaining stuff. It's very hard to say these things without spoiling stuff sometimes. I think I will have a little moment at the end of this video where I'm going to go full geek and just spoil out. So character development is definitely done super well. Super well. Could it have been done better? Sure. I think that's something you could say about any novel. At the end of the day, even my opinions on this are very subjective. It depends on my preferences and whatnot. So that's definitely good. The world building, I think, is maybe the Shadow of What Was Lost's weakest point, because there is a lot of interesting stuff expressed, but for someone, especially someone who's not that big of a reader, who comes in and starts trying to read this book, it can be extremely frustrating that there's these little tidbits told about places and stuff, but it's never fully explained. You don't really get to see the world. A lot of this stuff happens in only certain small areas, so you don't really see the world develop. There's not a lot of explanation for things. You don't understand where are the other lands? What's happening? But I think for those of us who have read enough fantasy series, especially larger form fantasy series, they give enough information that it won't drive you too crazy. And as I've said before, the foreshadowing is done and paced well enough that for most people, they'll just be able to really dive into the character development, appreciate the world, and be patient enough to wait for book 2 so that we can really see the world be developed even more, which will be great. I can't wait to read the second book in the series. So if you were looking for a big, epic, high fantasy that has a lot of stuff that you've probably read about before, but you're looking for a really intriguing new twist to things, I would definitely recommend checking out The Shadow of What Was Lost. I would definitely give it an 8 on 10. The little bit that's missing, I think, has more to do with the fact that this is James Islington's first book, and it's a big-ass book for someone who's first started writing. Like, this is a big book. And he's trying to do a lot with it. A lot. And he managed to get it pretty down pat for his first try, which is really why I think he deserves the 8. I'd even give him a 9 if I was pushing it, but we'll leave it at an 8. So I'm going to geek out a little bit and do some spoilers, so if you're someone who does not want to hear any spoilers about the book, say bye-bye. I love you still. Thanks for staying around. Spoiler time. So, oh God, for those of you who've read the book series, Caden's story is just fucking phenomenal. Phenomenal. I love the way James just really developed Caden's story. Like, you could see it coming from a mile off that he was probably Arkin, but God, it was really done well. He gives you a little bit of hesitation. He makes you doubt it. He makes you think, okay, maybe he's a lieutenant or someone who's just high up in the organization devoted to him. But no, he really pulls it back. And that twist at the end, finding out that Caden is almost 4,000 years old, and that there's all these things he's done that have been both horrendous but also good, how he's butchered an entire people but also saved another group of people, his development as a person, that he became the way he is through I forget what their name is, the Chalice. The Chalice are like the lizard people who have magical abilities, and yet we've learned about those lizard people near the beginning. So are they on Arkin's side? Like, all this stuff, like what happened in the Rising Lands, the Shining Lands. How was the technology built for time manipulation, and what happened back then? Just what happened? Was it the Chalice people's fault? Was it Caden's fault? They do that super well. Davian coming back from the future, having that weird binding chain on him that seems to be sentient, and it's sort of punishing him and hurting him, but he's able to shut it down to a certain degree so that he could speak to the present time's Ashalia and let her know certain things. There's all these mysteries that are thrown in little bits and pieces that are just really great and really make me want to read the next book really badly. I think between Davian and Caden, the series is just set. I like Ashalia, I like Weir's character. I think the other small little side characters themselves have enough personality and things that are interesting about them that you really want to get to know them also. But just between Caden and Davian, just this development of I got the sense that Caden was maybe the first augur, the first of his kind, something that the Chalice had taken in to teach. And so Davian is the end point of that development also. They're similar in some sense, so I think there's going to be some kind of connection between the two, although Caden is most definitely far more powerful and just so much more advanced, which is interesting in and of itself, because no matter what, Davian is still mainly the central character, is who you get most of the information from. Caden, you only get little bits and pieces, so maybe that's going to change in the second book, and it's going to be much more focused on Caden. But I think it's still going to mostly focus through Davian's eyes, so it's cool to see that he actually is not the strongest. He's special, he has all these gifts, and he's definitely going to develop into something beast. But Caden is so far advanced from him, and has been alive for so long that that's going to be really, really fantastic to see. And I really hope James manages to pull it off in the second and third book. But considering this is his first novel and he did it so well, I don't see how he can screw up the second and third. I can only see it getting better, but you never know. Shit happens. So yeah, that's my geek thoughts, my spoilers. I just really, really, really can't wait to see Caden go full pin, just destroy people. Yeah, it's mostly my little fanboying. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to attempt to get back into making more reviews, going to be checking out more books, going to be checking out more anime. I'm going to be doing a review of Parasite in probably later today. Probably still be wearing this shirt, so tune in. And I'm reading Neil Gaiman's The Graveyard book. I have no idea where I put it right now, but I'm reading The Graveyard book. For the second time, I'm going to be doing a review of that. I love Neil Gaiman. I love his pretty much all of his books, although Neverwhere is probably my favorite, and I can't wait to do a review of that. But Graveyard book's next. Then I'll be reading the second book in the Lycanius trilogy and doing a review of that. And I've got Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood coming up as a review. I will definitely, as you can see, be geeking out more and more. The geek circle has finally been complete. I'm about to break my table. I was sitting on the floor for most of my videos beforehand. So we are upping up the ante. We are getting more and more professionnel, as we like to say in the French. I am French, by the way, for those of you who can tell. I don't think you can. Do I look French? Do I look Irish? People argue. I'm from Quebec. On parle français ici. On est les Français. Les Québécois, as we like to say. Although I was definitely raised more in English, so that's why I sound beautiful. Okay, I'm going to stop messing around. Thanks again for checking out this review. There's going to be much more coming along in the future as I get more into the flow of doing this full time, basically. And I wish for you to like, subscribe, comment, let me know what you think. Check out the website, geeksandbarbells.com. Check out all the other stuff I do, and if you like it, let me know. If you don't like it, let me know nicely, because I'm a very gentle soul. Peace, everybody.